So we're here to talk about Module 5, which covers Chapter 6, and kind of how it relates to the Hockaday case. So the first question asks us to describe the primary work teams in the Hockaday case and discuss their strengths and challenges applying the text. So they have a team-based structure, and the research indicates that team-based organizations generally outperform more hierarchical organized structures in terms of product and service output. They have less absenteeism, fewer industrial accidents, more worker flexibility, quality improvements, and an overall job satisfaction. And that information was found on page 6.4. Also on page 6.4, Michael Hackman and Craig Johnson reported research that covered 15 years. And that describes team-based structures as being more innovative, more able to share information, more involved, and task-skilled than more traditional organizational structures. However, there are some possible weaknesses in a team-based structure. It requires a complex mixture of technical and communication competencies, adapting to and providing and receiving feedback, and of course, career advancement ambiguity. So oftentimes in a team-based structure, because they don't have that traditional hierarchy, it's hard to tell how you are advancing in your career. And then they also mention the potential for exploitation or continual pressures to increase productivity. And all of that information was also found on page 6.4. So in addition to being a team-based structure, it's a geographically diverse team. Some of the strengths of that are flexibility and the ability to run a 24/7 setup using the various time zones. And of course, diversity leads to more creative problem solving. Some of the weaknesses on a geographically diverse team is that they're heavily technology dependent. If technology fails, they often are at a lack of ability to communicate. They also lack the face-to-face interaction that can help create effective problem-solving skills. So those are just a few of the different primary work teams in the Hockaday case. Moving on, according to our authors, what types of team roles do the various members of the virtual team play? So Mary is obviously the team leader. Now I understand that they had a rotational leadership, but it never really talked about anybody else in the team lead position other than Mary. Ruggiero is the virtual team's top management go-to guy. Brian and Martin were mentioned as kind of the software tech specialists, and Gertie and Kim were responsible for tracking metrics. Jerry did hardware support, and all the team members have task roles. And some of the task roles that are suggested on page 6.5.2 are making suggestions, contributing new ideas, asking for facts, and providing information. However, the area that I think that they could improve in is the maintenance roles. And the textbook describes maintenance roles as being those roles which promote social support among group members. And some of these are described as reconciling differences, suggesting areas of agreement, relieving tension, and finding consensus. So, for example, Francois could be said to be acting out of a self-centered role because he tried to wrangle leadership from Mary during the first crisis that they had. Moving on to question 3, they want us to identify negative behaviors in the virtual team that were discussed in Chapter 6. So one of them that was mentioned in Chapter 6, when it talks about the negative behaviors and the positive behaviors towards the end of the chapter, it talks about arguing stubbornly for your own ideas. And one could say that Francois thought he was better qualified to lead the group and that Mary should instead focus on the software and hardware issues while he handled the rest. So that's kind of in a way stubbornly arguing for your own ideas. Other than that example, I didn't specifically see any of the other negative behaviors that were described in that section of the textbook. And then, of course, the last question is, were there any lessons in Chapter 6 that Jill could consider or should consider? One of the biggest ones, and I think they kind of resolved it towards the end of the case, was more face-to-face interaction between members. One of the things that I feel that this group really lacks is that the social support role. And I think if they had more face-to-face interaction and spent time with one another on a more frequent basis, that could be resolved. Another thing that they did mention towards the end of the case as well was adding additional members to decrease the workload. So I think that that will be helpful for the team and make it so that it's not so stressful when those crises situations kind of come up. And then, of course, I had this idea, and I don't really know, it's not supported by any of the text or anything, but maybe they could rotate people in and out of the team so that they're not always working on the critical case problems. Because from my understanding upon reading the case study, this is a specialized team that handles the worst case scenarios. So maybe if they spent some time rotating in and out of the team, and give them the opportunity to spend some time just strictly providing regular customer support, that could give them a little bit more balance so that they're not always in that high stress situation. So those are my thoughts for this week on Chapter 6 and the Hockaday case study. I look forward to listening to all of your responses. Have a great day.